Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar titled Digital Process Automation, Your Key to Digital Transformation, presented by Newgen, a leading provider of BPM, ECM, and CCM software, and featuring Forrester Research as a guest speaker. I am Darshak Parmar, and I shall be your host and the moderator for this webinar today. Today, we will have Rob Koplowitz from Forrester Research, Vice President, Principal Analyst serving application development and delivery professionals, and Tim Kreiner from Newgen Software, a practicing leader and subject matter expert as our speakers. At the end of the presentation, we'll be having a question and answer session. We request you to type your questions in the question window of your GoToWebinar anytime, and I shall take them up at the end of the session with our experts. With that, I'll hand it over to Rob.
Well, thank you, and thanks everybody for joining. It's always a pleasure to present on behalf of Newgen. It's always a pleasure to present with Tim. So we have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to jump right in and talk about where we've gone at Forrester with our research around process automation and content. It's an incredibly important topic to our clients. And I think what we're discovering is it is the crucial ingredient to digital transformation. So today we're going to talk about the concept of delivering end-to-end digital transformation, which is, I think, a little bit bigger than some of the challenge people took on when they started their digital transformation initiatives. It turns out it's a little bit more complicated than we thought. And it turns out that there is an awful lot of technology out there to help folks. We always like to start off with a little data at Forrester and give you a sense of how our clients are thinking about the market. And this one is very specific to process improvement, and we'll talk about process improvement, process automation. Read that as process and content throughout the course of this, because the two are so deeply intertwined. But you know, what I really want to do is draw your attention to a couple of different lines. We've done this survey twice. We're about to start it again, and it's been really driving the core of our research now for almost 4 years. Look at the red line that talks about the primary focus for process improvement, and look at cost reduction. This is the heart of what was BPM, digital process automation, for many years, was taking out costs, reducing errors, driving out people costs wherever you can, driving straight through processes where you can. And that was all good work. It was really good work, and it was largely very successful, and it remains important work to take out cost. But by the same token, I want you to actually look at the green line, because the green line is what folks are claiming is now really taking over their process improvement initiatives, and that's to accelerate digital business transformation. It goes from 13% 2 years ago up to 32% today, and it's almost half of folks say that is their primary driver 2 years from now. This actually changes the dynamic. You know, this is the point at which, you know, if we were sitting face to face, folks would say, but look, everything on the left column is all interconnected, Rob. You can't do digital transformation without driving down costs, without improving worker productivity and customer experience, and everything we do has to have an underpinning of regulatory compliance. And the answer is all of that is true. But the very way we worded the question is, what is your primary focus? What are you primarily trying to achieve? And as you can see, digital transformation is the primary driver. And where does that change things so dramatically? Well, let's look at the methodologies that people are using to actually achieve process improvement over the next 24 months. And you see a few things here that are really different than the traditional BPM landscape, than the traditional enterprise content management landscape. Look at the concept of journey mapping jumping to the forefront. 57% of folks who are working on process improvement plan to increase the use of customer journey mapping, and 26% plan to increase it significantly. Now that changes things a lot, because if you think about what your customers are seeing as part of your face to them, It's very different when you think about it from the perspective of a customer journey. And this is really, I think, the heart of what we're seeing in terms of a lot of digital transformation initiatives failing, and most of them are. So what's going wrong? Well, I can build a great mobile application and I can call that digital transformation, but if it's simply exposing that everything I do on the back end is manual, every piece of paper is being handled and routed manually, every process involves a spreadsheet, then the customers very, very quickly realize you're not digitally transformed, you're not doing business like a true disruptive organization. Two more points on this slide. Look at design thinking. And design thinking leaps 55% and then 26% plan to increase it significantly. That's really folks saying, not only are these things going to increasingly be directly in front of my customers, patients, employees, citizens, whoever it is that's on the receiving end of your application that makes these things better, but the processes that support them are going to be part of that as well. So a big jump in terms of design thinking, and really the recognition that someone is on the other end of this using this, and it may well be a customer in a government, citizen, and then, you know, in healthcare patients. These are the stories that we hear about. And then lastly, one more comment on this slide. Look at Lean Six Sigma, which we use as a proxy for process excellence. Are you really thinking about driving processes towards greater efficiency? Are you really putting a focus on process reengineering at the same time you're thinking of digital transformation? And the answer is a resounding yes. 32% increasing the use of Lean Six Sigma, 4% increasing significantly. We thought a little bit of this might fall off as we move to faster execution of projects, a little less upfront analysis where process professionals tended to thrive, but it hasn't dropped off. Actually, our processes have become more significant. They've become more critical. So a lot of really rich information coming from our clients in terms of how they're viewing process, and really what went wrong. If you think about the concept of the customer journey versus the concept of the CX, the customer experience application, you could build a great mobile application. You can build a great Alexa skill or a Google Home skill for people to interact with, very cutting edge. You can talk to a system from the car, but if everything on the back end, if all of your customer journey is exposed through manual operational processes, you haven't really automated. So, you know, when I go to get a status on something that's shipping, when I want to see the status of a customer onboarding process, when I'm in the midst of a claims process and your claim system is manual, and I'm looking at a mobile application as beautiful as it may be, and it simply says pending for days at a time, and I have no idea what's happening, I've got no transparency, I really haven't digitally transformed anything, and that's a big job. That's a very different motion than we're used to with kind of the way we looked at the old BPM, ECM, big bang implementations. You know, those were like turning the aircraft carrier. They were very big, very complex projects, and they did a lot of good. They actually were really positive in terms of the business benefits. But now we're faced with something different. I have a lot of things that I have to transform, and it's more like turning a bunch of speedboats in unison. And so, you know, it's not that one of these maneuvers is more difficult than the other. They're both incredibly difficult. They're both really, really hard to achieve, and the value associated with both of them is very high. It's just that turning the aircraft carrier, that's kind of how IT thought about the world. You know, just give me a bunch of money, give me a bunch of software, I'll build it, you'll love it, it'll be great. And now suddenly we find out that it's very different. And why is it so different? It's just the sheer amount of automation that we're faced with at this point. And we look at three ways that this shows up as part of a customer journey, and where these customer journeys break down in terms of process automation. So first off, we have packaged applications, right? You've got SAP, you've got Oracle, you've got any one of a number of packaged applications, Salesforce, that are running the processes within your organization. Is that really where you want to continue to configure and customize your processes? And for some, the answer is yes. For many, the answer is no. but certainly the customer journey almost always crosses these legacy systems, almost always crosses these line of business systems. And since the customer journey doesn't respect the boundaries of the process, well, guess what? The process starts to appear broken. There's electronic manual routing. We define this one, this second bar chart here, as things like spreadsheets that get emailed around, for warranty returns, for shipping status, for inventory management, logistics. There's just dozens and dozens, hundreds actually, of areas where things are automated through spreadsheets. And 50% of the organizations say they have many of their processes running in this manner, and 18% say they have most. And in a digitally transformed world, that's really difficult. If you're afraid of Amazon entering your business, guess what? That's not how they automate things. It's a very different model when a disruptor enters your market. And then lastly, paper and content. We've been chipping away at this for years, but this is still a very important part of the scenario. There's a lot of things that get routed either through paper or through some other unstructured construct that comes in through email, or it comes in through even fax. It comes in through a lot of different forms. And it still requires humans to look at those things and classify them and extract data from them. And it's really time consuming and it's really expensive. So even though we've been looking at paper-based and content management solutions and content analytics solutions for many years, there's still a lot of work to be done here and a lot of greenfield in order to make things better. But the takeaway from this chart is there's just a lot, right? This is not a big bang project and it's all going to go away. This is probably based on some large projects. It's certainly based on some larger initiatives. Digital transformation, by definition, is going to be a very large critical initiative, but sitting behind it, there's going to be just a massive amount of work. And we're going to have to think about approaching that work differently than we have in the past. And why is it? Well, ultimately, customers don't care about your challenges. There's a lot of reasons why you can't actually automate. There's a lot of reasons why you can't digitally transform. But guess what? They only care about the journey. If I do business with one bank and everything is seamless and I pull up a mobile app and 20 minutes later, I'm approved for a loan, or 15 minutes later, I'm ready to go pick up my credit card at the bank or have it delivered to me, that's all they care about. And if you don't do that, they're going to go to a competitor that does. The journey is the king. And most of the time, when you try to go through these customer experience mapping processes and the CX professionals in the room, only 30% of the time are we in the room. Those of us on this call, folks who are technology minded, process professionals, we don't get invited to the party, and we need to be invited to the party because we play a huge role in this level of automation. They don't know what structured versus unstructured means. They don't know if you need to know your customer, that if you send in a fax of a utility bill, that's really hard for a machine to read. They just know that someone else does it and your company can't. They don't care if it takes a long time for you to figure out why an angry email is being responded to. It's not their problem. They only want to do business with somebody that's really automated, really seamless. They don't care about your spreadsheets. They don't care about what's being emailed around. They don't care about the batch updates that you only do on Friday, automated versus manual. It's not part of their thinking. They don't care about your organizational boundaries. They don't care about the fact that, when you're dealing with my claim and you're an insurance company, well, I can only control so much of it. Now we have to go over to a different department and they're going to handle that for you. And they'll get in touch with you soon. They don't care. They don't care about your legacy systems. They don't know what an API is. They don't know what integration is. They just know that the journey has to be seamless and automated. And that content is also a very, very big problem. So, so you're up against a very harsh reality. You're up against a harsh reality that if your competitors do this extremely well, and that's what disruptors do, you have to react and do it extremely well, or maybe even become the disruptor. We see this happening in a couple of different ways. We introduce this and we talk about this in most of our customer and client facing engagements, the concept of deep versus wide. And deep it's the aircraft carrier. It's structured, it's methodical. There's a small number of applications. IT owns it. There's often a center of excellence. The business has to be involved, but we've never been able to involve them as much as we've wanted to. IT is in the business of security and the business of governance and the business of privacy. And these did tend to focus on cost reduction, and we're still going to do these types of deep projects. And you're going to deal with folks like Newgen and others, but you're also going to look at folks like Newgen to say, can we do this in a different way? Can we build applications faster? Can we build a lot of applications with a relatively high level of complexity? Can the business take a much, much more substantial lead, because they're the ones that understand these hundreds of processes that are going on? And can IT move into more of a role of being in the guardrails? You know, we make sure that we're going to provide you the data. We're going to make sure the data stays intact, that privacy is respected, that our systems of record are respected, and that we can focus on customer outcomes. So a very different type of motion in executing these content and process applications, but really kind of thinking about them as different faces of the same problem, and looking for tools that can do both. So, this concept of low code is a big one, and a number of folks have really embraced this. Certainly Newgen has very much embraced the idea of building faster. And having a greater involvement from business users, and not taking a huge dependence on only certain skills in terms of development being the way you build things. But there's also been kind of this sense of, you know, is low code really strategic to my organization? And we try to dig into that a little bit with some research to say, okay, if you're building fast, does that mean you're building things that are not as critical? Well, it turns out the answer to that is no. And it turns out it's actually a resounding no. So if you look at the right two sets of bubbles, look at the middle set, the middle green, these are folks who have no plans to develop low code. They're not going to use it at all. And you look at their priorities, grow revenue is at 39%. Now look at the folks who are using low code. It jumps to 46%. Improving customer service goes from 37 to 45%. Improved products and services, 35 to 47%. Innovation, 28 to 43%. And then brand influence, 26 to 42%. These are huge jumps that tell us that the people who are embracing low code are using it to drive very, very strategic high-end initiatives. All of these things are strategic. These are not operational, keep the lights on things. These are differentiate my brand, differentiate my organization, and make things better for the people that work with me. So really high acceptance, but really doing it to achieve very critical strategic results. And when you look at low code tools, like what should your low code tool? Just looking at a couple of markets here in terms of the types of applications people primarily build with them. Well, if we look at Europe and the entire world here in terms of the light and the dark green bars, you see a number of these that are built for business process and workflow applications. These are the lifeblood of digital transformation. These are the applications that we have to build, the hundreds of them that are sitting out there. We didn't always appreciate the concepts of workflow and process. That was generally that kind of big BPM project that was going off in the corner. No more. Now it's really become part of everything. And if you think about the concept of a customer journey, it is a process, it is a workflow. So this all makes perfect sense. Just a couple thoughts on the tooling that you're going to use to get there, because I think everybody will say, well, I have the magic bag of beans for you that'll do that. I can help you. That you have an ECM problem, or you have a low code problem, or you have increasingly a robotic process automation problem. If you think about all the work that needs to be done out in this area to automate customer journeys, we call this the business developer zone. We call it the business developer zone because it really brings in much more focus from the business. And in terms of the tooling, the answer is, what are you going to use? The answer is, you're going to use all of this. Chances are, if you're a complex organization, you're going to have to work with a vendor that understands the proper use of all of these different pieces. So there's digital process automation, what we used to call BPM. It's faster, it's much more efficient to build in today. You have to have an ECM component. We've talked extensively here about the role of content and unstructured data. You're probably going to be building things faster using low code. You're probably going to need to work with a vendor that understands where and how RPA fits into the overall into the overall value proposition. RPA does human-based task automation extremely well. It's something that I think is incredibly complementary to the standard digital process automation platforms. You're probably going to have rules. You're probably going to have business decisioning. There's certainly an emerging role and a growing role for artificial intelligence, and all of these are going to be part of your portfolio, and you really need to be thinking about product or products that accept all of these as complementary technology. So because this is where digital transformation happens. It happens out here in this business developer zone, and it is technology heterogeneous. A few thoughts before I turn you back over to Tim. So thing number one, think about this in terms of a comprehensive technology approach. We talked about the business drivers here, and the business drivers being largely around digital transformation, the competitive threats. This is what the calls come in. These are why people call me and want to talk about this technology. But ultimately, it is something that has to be implemented through technologies. You have business problems that are going to require a very comprehensive and holistic technology approach. And within that, you're going to have to think about governance and keeping these discrete technologies where they belong. Is it deep? Is it wide? Do I need to apply RPA here? This is a really complex decision tree or decision branch. Do I apply decisioning? Do I apply rules? Think about this in terms of how you would guide somebody to use the right technology at the right time to achieve your goals. Your business is going to be more a part of this than you've ever seen before. You cannot make this change without the support of your business, and your business probably isn't necessarily aware of this right now. So there's going to be a focus on change management. How do you support the development process? Are you going to put your hands on keyboards? Are you going to develop things using low code? Are you going to sit side by side with a professional developer? Are you going to be more deeply involved in the business analysis phase? But in any event, they're going to be more involved, and there's going to be more of the business involved than you've ever seen before. And luckily, the tooling and the approaches will support this. If you have an aversion to standards and enterprise architecture, I don't know what to say other than you're going to have to get over it. I know this bullet always causes people to cause a little bit angst when people see it. I want every part of the business to go as fast as they can and to do the product, use the things that they need to do. If you have a standard approach that says this is how we build process applications and this is how we manage content, think about that across the organizational boundaries and the legacy systems that make up your customer journey, and very quickly you get a sense that we're swinging back towards an era where standards and architecture are going to become really important. So with that, what I want to do is I want to turn it back over to Tim and let Tim take you through the value proposition for Newgen specifically.
Thank you very much. I'm Tim Kreiner. And in just a moment, I'm going to be sharing a screen with you. And are you able to see the screen? Very good. Okay, first off, Rob, thank you very much for a great introduction to the theme of digital transformation and customer experience. You gave us a lot to think about. In fact, as I listen to you talk, I think about customer experiences changing process automation completely. And I gathered 4 key takeaways from your presentation. And the first is that the primary drivers in the industry have changed from cost reduction and increasing productivity to accelerating business transformation and improving customer experience. Wow, that's incredibly different from where we've been for the last number of years. Number 2, the digital transformation focuses on customer experiences and outcomes, not on process improvement. The two work hand in hand, but they're radically different from each other and radically different from what we've done for the last 20 years to make things better and faster. Number 3, the abundance of both structured and unstructured content is impeding exercises to improve processes. We've suspected this for years, and now your most recent research has borne this out. And the last point is journey mapping is on everybody's radar. The percentages that you showed were outstanding. The customer journey is the king. Now, kind of to summarize that or wrap that all up, over the past several years, we've seen fundamental changes in business priorities across all industries that are arising from some disruptive B2B and B2C companies. Amazon is one. We deal with these companies every day, and we make purchases every day, and we enjoy beautiful buying experiences. And that's why we continue to buy from these companies, even if their prices might not be the lowest in the market. The changing priorities in Rob's slide indicate that this market shift in priorities is something that organizations must understand quickly or face the risk of losing market share. Now, before I begin, or before I go much further, let me emphasize that business process automation is not digital transformation. Those are two different things. And there's a great deal of confusion in the market regarding the similarities and differences between the two goals of improving efficiency and reducing the number of steps and integrating sources of information along with what you get through customer experience. Digital transformation is similar to process automation in that it does seek operational efficiency, but the main goal is to achieve an outcome that creates a greater experience for all consumers. Think about that for just a second. Digital transformation is a journey that needs to be looked at from several perspectives. And let me give you a quick and simple analogy, and I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to go off script here, but bear with me for just a moment. I recently took a flight from Los Angeles to Orlando, and let me use this to talk about processes, the deep processes. And let me talk about automation and customer experience. A Boeing 737 has certain performance specifications at which the aircraft functions its best. There's an ideal rate of climb between 30 and 40 degrees. There's an ideal rate and angle of bank between 45 and 60 degrees, as well as descent rates between 3,000 and 5,000 feet per minute. I mention these because I'm an avid flight instructor, and this serves to illustrate a point. These parameters may be ideal for the aircraft, but they're not ideal for passengers. So in my flight from LA to Orlando, immediately after takeoff, I could have climbed at a rate that would be frightening for passengers, but would be ideal for my performance goals. I would try to fly in a perfectly straight line from LA to Orlando and minimize any extra distance and fuel burn, even if there were storms in the way. If I did have to bank or turn, I might do that turn at 45 or 60 degree angle. That'd be frightening to passengers, but very efficient. And on my descent could be a 3,000 feet per minute descent that would cause many passengers to become faithful. This is similar to a BPM process that's designed for efficiency, just for efficiency. It might be ideal from an efficiency perspective, but terribly lacking from a customer experience perspective. Now, if I were to design that same exact flight solely with the customer experience in mind, I might take off with a very shallow climb. I might have shallow banks. I might deviate around storms and implement very gradual descents. It'd be very comfortable for passengers, but my overall costs would increase significantly and efficiency would therefore suffer. So we need to find a balance between process efficiency and customer experience. And this isn't unlike Rob's discussion of deep and wide processes in business. The deep processes might be the straight line route between LA and Orlando. This is structured, methodical, integrated with all other systems, and efficient. Introduce a concept of a wide process and you allow the pilot to adjust the climb rate, the angle of bank, the deviation from storms, and essentially adhere to the flight route, but giving better comfort to the passengers. In this case, the wide processes are those minor deviations in the ad hoc discretion of the pilot or captain to do as he sees fit. So it is in business. Now, I hope that illustrated in a very simplistic term that every one of us can relate to the concept of a process and a customer experience. Now, I went online and I just bought a nice set of Bluetooth earbuds and listen to the following scenario. I completed a purchase order online on the company's portal. In some back-end software package reviewed my form, it checked the inventory and production schedules in another system and notified me of the estimated lead time. Another back-end system also communicated with American Express and verified my credit card. Some software somewhere in the middle entered the PO into a sales order system or an ERP, including my special instructions, put in my name on the earbuds. The ERP staged inventory logistics and scheduled manufacturing. Then the finished goods were routed to a third-party shipper. The third-party shipper delivered the goods to my house and notified the manufacturer of delivery. And then the manufacturer notified me that the goods were delivered. Let's look at that process for just a second. That was an 8-day process. It was 9 high-level steps covering at least 8 different systems or processes that all had to work with each other. There are 3 to 4 external parties and only 2 interactions with the customer. Once when I placed the order and once when I received them. That was a good experience, but it seemed like a long wait. But let me show you what really happened. I completed the purchase order on the online portal. I instantly received a thank you note from the vendor with my estimated shipping date. The next morning, I received another note from the vendor that my goods would ship and be arriving in 8 days. The next day, I received another note from the vendor stating that my goods were scheduled in manufacturing and would be arriving in 7 days. 2 days later, I received a note from the vendor that my goods had been shipped by a third-party delivery company and would be arriving in 2 to 3 days. The next day, I received a note saying, good news, your goods have shipped early and you're going to have your product 1 day early. The product was delivered the next day, and within minutes, I received a thank you note from the vendor. And the next day, I received a note from the vendor hoping that I had a good experience. So if you look at that, assuming that the outcome was exactly the same in both of those instances, which one gave the best customer experience? All consumers today have a variety of alternatives for suppliers, and customers have grown to expect digital experiences that are both pleasing and efficient, and it's up to us to give them those. New economics, business paradigms, even organizational structures must evolve side by side along with a digital technology platform to adapt these balancing issues. So traditionally, the businesses used to look at digital transformation as a way to reduce cost, minimize errors, lower cycle times. The focus was on productivity improvement and on process. And as Rob mentioned, customer experience was not the biggest priority. This has changed. The organization from whom I bought these earbuds are changing the way we consumers want to do business. And it all begins with a deep look at the customer's experience. If they didn't look at the customer's experience, they couldn't have given me that satisfaction. So customer experience isn't really a choice anymore. And how is your organization different from other organizations? You have to ask yourself that. The question begins with my organization, my experience, what my consumers are doing, what experience are they having? And if you sit down and if you take a look in the banking industry, about 40% of customers go online to make inquiries of the bank, yet only 10% of the sales occur in retail in the bank digitally. Why is that? Where is the disconnect? Well, there's more than one disconnect here. I think there are 4 disconnects, and the first level deals with process. Organizations wanting to reach out to their customers through multi-channel experiences have underlying broken processes resulting in frustrating experiences and disconnected touch points to their customers. Number 2, there's a human level of disconnect. Most consumers today want to have some level of human interaction. In a purely digital interaction may not satisfy the need for personal attention, but then again, it could be. Look at my experience with the earbuds. I felt like I was getting an email from a friend telling me exactly what to expect. The next level of disconnect is the physical aspect, and many consumers are binary. They want to deal only with people or they want to deal only with systems. And these 3 levels of disconnect make it harder for organizations to maintain high levels of customer experience no matter what their underlying process automation is. So underlying process automation is absolutely critical. You have to have that, and it has to connect with the process, with the people, with the physicality of it. Very quickly, I'm going to touch on 3 organizations that are using this technology, and they're achieving successful customer experiences. And the first is a healthcare manufacturing company, and their customers include hospitals, health agencies, labs, government agencies. And the organization has a variety of different platforms in-house and customers and employees who have to access those daily. Everyone needs to interact with the different systems and different interfaces to resolve any queries that they might have. And the information tends to be siloed. And that means that employees can't resolve all the questions in one call. So the organization mapped their IT landscape against the customer and the employee journeys. And they gained visibility across the different platforms. They were able to reduce the number of touch points for the customers and for the employees. And they gave transparent access to information so that a user from one device or one user interface could access information that might have resided in a totally different system. And that all resulted in faster processes and better customer experiences. There's another organization that we have as a customer, and their operations involved at least 22 different platforms. They operate in about 100 countries, and they operate using older technology to share information with requests all throughout the company. The processes are all manual for consolidating requests. There are different standards in different locations, and there are long cycle times. They map the user journeys, and they process flows, and they auto-routed requests to current approvers or people who needed to approve specific requests. And that sped up the execution time and the experience for the customers. As a result, they have much better timing and tracking their requests, 40 to 50% reduction in their errors, and a much smoother intake process. And that's just another example. One last example is an organization on pension health. This is an organization that had a large number of processes, well in excess of 500 for processing customer requests. Lots of paper. Took a long time to process all of the customer requests. So one of their main goals was timeliness and a reduction of paper. They mapped their journey. We worked very closely with them. We came in with a system that provided a 360-degree view of all of their processes and SLAs pertaining to requests. We reduced the manual processing of those requests, and we created one single process that touched all of the different types of requests and reduced the turnaround time by 50%. So we know that the customer journey is important, but there are 4 key ingredients to a customer journey, to improving the customer journey. Business processes that are fully orchestrated, and synchronized with the customer journeys result in much better customer experiences. And by automating as many processes as you can using straight-through processing, speeds the whole process up, making it much more gratifying to people that are looking for instant gratification, which are all consumers today. And by automating as many processes as you can through the by automating these processes and having access to the customer histories and knowing more about their past experiences with your organization helps you deal with them in ways that they and you might not have anticipated. And last, maybe the most challenging for many, is creating an environment where customers have a unified experience regardless of what system they started on or what system they're using. The seamless movement between and among those is what makes the difference between a good process and a great process. So how do you do that? How do you achieve that? At Newgen, we achieve that by having a unified automated platform. And that platform brings together all kinds of structured and unstructured content, digital automated processing, and communication to all people throughout. And we do this in such a way that we integrate in throughout the entire enterprise on the lower half of the circle, touching every one of the systems and every one of the sources of information all throughout the organization, and delivering that information in the context of different industries, different business processes, different users inside the same organization, utilizing some advanced technologies such as single sign-on, blockchain, RPA, cloud, business analytics, and APIs, giving a seamless experience to those users that can be near instantaneous. Now, we've done this all over the world. We operate, as you can see on this chart right here, all over the United States, all over Asia, Australia, Europe. We've got about 540 active customers. These are customers that have done transactions just in the last couple of years. Our installed base spans 66 different countries. We've got about 3,000 employees, and we have one platform, and every single part of our platform is something that we at Newgen have developed ourselves. We didn't grow by acquiring different companies. We didn't have to integrate in with other companies. Our solutions are 100% our own, and they span at least 17 to 20 different verticals. We have a great relationship with all of the industry analysts, most importantly Forrester, who sees us as a strong performer for ECM content, a strong performer for digital process automation, and a leader in cloud-based dynamic case management. So a couple of key takeaways. I'd like to leave you with just the following thoughts. Digital transformation is a long journey, and it needs to be examined from multiple perspectives. One from your customer's perspective and another one from your perspective. Successful digital processes and businesses are predicated on great, not good customer journeys. And great customer experiences are characterized by having streamlined experiences across all devices and touch points. So when you look at improving your customer journey, the first question you need to be asking yourself is, how can I produce a better outcome for my customers? And that involves a deep review of the process experience from the customer's perspective, your employee's perspective, a thorough analysis of your IT landscape, in a review of the process automation and straight-through processing, and a deep understanding of how you interact with each customer engagement and develop a lasting and connected enterprise. So with this, I'm going to conclude. And if anyone would like some additional information on any aspect of this presentation or customer case studies, you can feel free to visit our website or to contact us. And now I'll turn it back to Darshak, and if there are any questions or answers, we'll be more than happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I have got a couple of questions, so let me take them up one by one. The first question is for Rob. In case of wide deployments where business is more empowered to create applications, what checks and guidelines IT should define to avoid mismanagement of applications?
Oh boy, that's a good one, because that's the one that we're grappling with. So you know, because guys, we've been here before, right? So just let the business build applications, and they'll solve all your problems, and then you'll end up with 8,000 Lotus Notes applications or 10,000 access databases. So we've done this balancing act before. We've heard the caveats. We understand them very, very well. So we really want to think about this from a very different approach in terms of how we look at this. First off, to the point that we made during the conversation, and Tim emphasized during his presentation really brilliantly, these customer journeys are these things run across multiple systems. They run across multiple organizational boundaries, but they have to do so in a consistent way that achieves a goal, right? And I think that's very different from where we've been with business-led technologies in the past. So we want to think about things in terms of consistency and consistency of the architecture, so that we can actually ensure that happening. In consistency of the training that people are going to have on using these systems, consistency in terms of the governance, in terms of the technology we deploy and how we deploy it. And if you remember that deep and wide slide, we dug into one of the big differences, which was the role of governance and IT taking on a role of governance. And governance is going to equal tools that allow them to maintain regulatory compliance, tools that allow them to maintain privacy, even if the business begins to develop applications, tools that are going to allow us to maintain security, tools that are going to maintain the integrity of our systems of record, because oftentimes we're touching those, we're accessing those. Tim gave some great examples of multiple systems being touched on the back end. So it's a big job. It's a really different job. It's really leading a lot of the research that we're going to be doing here through the end of this year around what does the new governance model and center of excellence for process look like. It's a daunting challenge, but we do think that the model of we're not going to empower the business, we're going to maintain tight control on this, is not scalable enough. So the answer is there's a lot. You're going to work very closely with your tool and platform vendors to make sure that they have the controls in place that you need when you empower the business. You're going to make sure that the business is developing what they should be building and not running willy-nilly like they have in the past. So yeah, great question, and hopefully we'll have a lot more research on that coming out from Forrester soon.
Thanks, Rob. The next one is for Tim. What is Newgen's approach for digital transformation in context of DPA deep and DPA wide? Is Newgen's platform able to serve both, or do they prefer either one of them?
The question is not whether we would prefer one or recommend one over the other. A deep process is one that's characterized by certain parameters, usually a heavy IT involvement, very critical access to systems in the organization, something that's very structured. And for that, we would use an IBPS approach. And for some things that are ad hoc in nature or exception driven, or where the users themselves need to create low code type workflows, we would use our case management capability in IBPS. So we can do both deep and wide. And the ideal implementation in an organization would have a combination of the two of those together. And we define which one of those is required based on sitting down with customers and helping them look at their current state, their desired to be state, and the best way of getting there. Did that help?
I think so, yes. And the audience can send a follow-up question on top of it if they have any. I have another question for Rob from the audience.
Yeah.
Based on your experience, do enterprises start small with one line of business for process automation, or it's like being pushed across all LOBs from the central team?
It really does start smaller. It starts project based. It does start like those, maybe more in line with those traditional BPM projects, but smaller. But what we do when we talk to them is we really try to enforce that if you're going smaller, you're probably going to do it a lot of times, right? So you should be looking at a platform that can handle those deep loads, that can handle those wide loads, if that's what's going to be applicable. So we very quickly try to bring them back to that conversation. I've mentioned it a couple times around standards and architecture. And that requires, a consistent approach that requires really a lot of times, not just technology alignment, but executive alignment. So yes, start small, but plan big, I think is the way most of our clients are approaching this.
Thanks. There is another one for you, Rob.
Yeah.
From what you are saying, are customers turning towards direct to manufacturer software relationship, or are customers still confident in using the channel model for solutions?
I don't think there's any particular pattern there. I think it goes both ways depending upon the organization. Channels and professional services, I think, are as I talk about kind of the enormity of what we're trying to achieve here and how much work there is to do across, not just technology barriers, but also organizational and change management barriers, we do find that channels and professional services firms are often very well tuned to help with a lot of things that are not necessarily technical in nature, and sometimes can help with them with things that are technical in nature. And so we're starting to see an uptick around that, particularly as relates to what is the role of process automation, content automation, as relates to digital transformation, as it starts to get bigger, and sometimes it moves up even to a strategic consulting role. But we see both patterns at play. Absolutely. I do think the channel model and the professional services model is a little bit strong right now, just because complexity, it tends to be where that thrives.
Thank you. Here is the last question. That's for Tim. Tim, someone loves your example of the airplane analogy that you shared. This is the question. Loved your airplane flying example and the comparison of efficiency, cost saving versus customer experience, and the need to combine both the approaches for an optimum result. Can you share some recommendation in selling this combined approach internally to a cross-functional team?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the compliment on the analogy. I think the analogy is apt, and I believe in industry, if you look at traditional IT organizations have looked at productivity improvement in streamlining an individual business process. And over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen innovation departments popping up in all the organizations and customer experience experts coming into just about every imaginable organization. And while they're looking at operational efficiency, they do have a different view, and their view is oftentimes juxtaposed to that of IT, traditional IT. And together, they're working to try to identify ways of maintaining high productivity, but at the same time, drastically increasing the organization. So there are some organizational dynamic changes and business paradigm changes that are both occurring in industry. And you need to look at your organization. You need to see what you have inside your organization. You need to see, is your organization consciously looking at both? If it's not, it's a good time to suggest that, possibly to operations or to IT. But you need to get people in your organization looking at both of those experiences, or other companies will be doing that in your stead. And we're happy to sit down and talk with anybody about some journey mapping. It begins with journey mapping, and really, and anyone can do this. Any one of you in the call, we have several hundred people in the call right now, you can have a look at one of your customer interactions, experiences, and you can map out that customer journey. How good, how satisfactory is that? And you can begin to have a look at that yourselves right now, and then you can sit down. We'd be more than happy to come in and help you understand if you're achieving what you can, given your IT landscape, given the processes and your goals and your strategic objectives. And we're happy to see how we might be able to help you here and maybe model out or simulate a process improvement plan for you.
Thanks, Tim. Those are all the questions I had for today. Rob and Tim, we really appreciate your time and your valuable insights. Thank you very much for today's webinar. Newgen will send across a copy of recording to all the registrants. Those who were not able to share their questions today, please feel free to send them over via email. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Darshak.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.